On Target Institute presents a teaching from the Men on Target small group curriculum. Now with today's session, On Target founder Vince D'Acchioli.
Hello men, how you doing? Welcome to session 27. In our last session, we dealt with the idea on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I doing in the area of letting go? And then we talked about coming to the end of yourself, the idea of humility. And I want to remind you again to go to otm.co if you haven't already and download the handouts for these important sessions. It's really critical that you do that. Session 27, Facing Trials, this is part 3, and as we've done on the last 2, let's go through this list again. I love this. Only God can turn a mess into a message. I hope you guys can just repeat this by heart by now. A test into a testimony, a trial into a triumph, and a victim into a victor. Now, we've gone through 4. So here we go again. I'm on my way to the hospital on this day. And again, God's in the backseat of my Avalanche. And this is what he says to me. He says, Vince, I know that you are really reaching out to me about the condition of your wife and you're praying for her. But I want you to start praying for you, Vince, because I do not want you to miss the lesson that I am trying to teach you in the midst of this struggle. Now, guys, listen. I don't know how this works, but God never wastes a good old struggle in our life were it not to teach us something. And I want you to remember that. But the idea is that we've got to look for it. We've got to go on a treasure hunt. And what God was trying to teach me is that I need to start praying that I do not miss my lesson. Doesn't mean I stop praying for Cindy, but start looking for what I'm trying to teach you. Psalm 4:1 says this, Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. The idea that he is making us a bigger person. He's building our character out of distress. James 1:2 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds. I remember I would read that verse sometimes and say, yeah, right. But, but it does not say, consider it pure joy once you've been through the trial and can look back at it. It says, in the midst of the trial. So, here's what happened. It wasn't long after that I got a phone call. It was late at night, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, I found myself rushing to the hospital because the doctor said that Cindy was about to suffocate to death. She may not make it through the night. What happened is that she had developed some blood clots in her lungs, which was preventing air from getting into her lower chamber, that she could really suffocate to death. And they had to do an emergency procedure on her, and I had to get up there right away. So I remember going to the hospital. I was very nervous, very afraid. I get to the hospital, and they brought this emergency team in. They didn't even have time to take her out of the ICU. They brought a team of about 5 doctors in. They had all this equipment. They had a television camera on the end of a little wire with a little device that would kind of, like a little clamp that would go down into her trach collar, into her lungs, where they could see where they were going, look for the blood clots, grab them and bring them out, and a TV screen where they could watch what was happening. It was amazing. And I am the only person in the room that wasn't a doctor. They allowed me to stay, and I'm watching this procedure. And the doctor, I don't remember her name, but I affectionately refer to her now as Dr. Grabber. Dr. Grabber went in and they started going down, and we watch it on the screen. She'd find a blood clot, grab it, and she'd start pulling on it. And you could see it on the screen. It looked huge on the screen. Of course, they're very, very small. But she would grab it, she'd start pulling, and all of a sudden a little tiny piece would break off. And all of the other doctors in the room would all go, oh. They were really disappointed. Then she'd go down again and she'd grab a piece and they'd watch, and all of a sudden a big chunk would come out. And all the doctors in the room would go, wow, did you see the size of that one? And it was like amazing. They were going, wow, and they were applauding and they were almost booing in direct proportion to the size of the clot that was being pulled out. It was just absolutely amazing. Well, she ended up going in there 31 times. I mean, I'm hyperventilating as she is sweating. The doctors around her sweating, and she's going in, and all of a sudden she stops. She puts the last little piece on the table. She takes off her mask. She gets this big smile on her face and says, she's clear. And everybody in the room started to applaud. It was amazing. Now, we get all done with that. She's now safe. I'm on my way home. driving in my car. You know who is in the back seat. And this is what he said. He said, Vince, excuse me, you got a lot of clots. I said, what? He says, you heard me. You got a lot of clots. Oh, Vince, I'm not talking about physical clots. I'm talking about spiritual clots. But in the very same way that those physical clots were keeping air from getting into your wife's lower chamber and really dangerous for her health and could have killed her, your physical clots are preventing the wind of my spirit from blowing through your life the way I fully intend. Now, men, please hear me, because there's not a man on the sound of my voice or watching this video right now that you don't know what your clots are. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And I get this picture of God up in heaven with the angels around the throne of God and a big monotron screen up in heaven, you know, like the video screen in that hospital room. And God is reaching down into Vince's life, and he's trying to pull these clots out, and he's pulling and pulling, and there's a big one. Maybe it's lust, maybe it's anger and greed and pride, whatever it might be. He's pulling, and a little tiny piece breaks off, and the angels are going, oh, wow, we missed that one. And all of a sudden he reaches down, and all of a sudden we let him get a big chunk out, and the angels are applauding, and they're going, wow, did you see that one? I don't know if that's the way it works actually, God, but that's the picture I got. That's the picture I got. God, listen, there's a relationship between me getting the crud out of my life and God being able to work through me in ways he fully intended. We've covered that when we talked about obedience in past sessions. So, on a scale of 1 to 10 in this area, listen, have you asked God to show you your lesson? In the midst of your trial, have you asked him to show you your lesson? Now, we got all done with that. And now I'm driving to the hospital, and on this occasion, Cindy's getting a little bit better, but I'm still kind of saying, Lord, you know what? I am weary of not seeing more of your miracles. That's what I said to him. I am weary of not seeing more of your miracles. Look, how many of you guys know God is a miracle-working God? But how many of you would say, you know, I sure would like to see more of him? That was my attitude. And I even said this, Lord, even if you don't heal Cindy, even if you decide to take her, because I'm now getting to the point where I trust you, God. No matter what, I trust you. And listen, God, there are two outcomes here. You could take her or you could not take her, but I know one outcome I'm going to like a lot, the other I'm not going to like very much, but at the end of the day, I trust you. I got to that point, okay? So I said that. I really want to see more of your miracles. And here's what he said. He said, Vince, do you remember going into the hospital, and I would go into the hospital and I'd take my hand and my finger and put it into her hand like that. She had all of her muscles had atrophied. She had no muscle tone at all. She couldn't move anything in her body. She could barely blink. And I would go in day after day and put my little finger down there and wait for her to just squeeze my hand. I would have given anything for just a gentle squeeze. He said, do you remember the day you went in there and you put your hand in hers and you felt that little gentle squeeze and you looked up at her and a little tear was coming down her face and she had a little smile on her face? And I said, yeah, Lord, he's bringing this to my mind. And he said, Vince, do you remember the day that you walked into that room? Your wife had been in a coma for like 2 weeks, and she was propped up in bed, and she hadn't opened her eyes in all of this time. And as you walked around the corner, and I remembered this vividly, I walked around the corner, as my face caught her face, her eyes instantly opened. She saw me, and she got this little smile on her face for the very first time. He said, do you remember that? And guys, I mean, it's hard for me to not share these with you right now without getting emotional as I'm thinking about them. And he shared several other kinds of things like that with me. And I'm thinking, yes, Lord, I remember that. And then this is what he did. He says, Vince, listen to me. I want you to know those are my miracles. He said, Vince, when you quit looking for me in the sensational, you'll find me in the simple. Guys, this is profound. There are miracles happening all around us every day, but sometimes we tend to only look for God in the big things and we kind of discard the simple things. In the midst of your trial, number 2, are you watching for the simple? Are you watching for what God's trying to show you when you're in the restaurant and you're being waited on by that person who doesn't look like they're having a very good day and you don't know what's going on in their life? Are you just bitter and angry because you're not getting taken care of, or are you interested in what God might want to do through you by way of a miracle in the life of that person? Listen, sitting next to you wherever you are right now, there's miracles all around you. If you're alone, wherever you go, there are miracles happening all the time. We need to be looking for God in the simple, not just in the sensational. Now, life implication? I miss God's biggest blessings by not seeing the lessons He is teaching me in the midst of my trial. That's the big takeaway from this session. Guys, are you really missing it because you're not seeing what God did? Listen, when we go through a trial, we can do one of two things. We can either bend into God, or we can kick our heels and go the opposite direction. Going the opposite direction doesn't work well, guys. Bend into God. Let Him reveal to you what He's trying to teach you. Life application, again, the two questions from this session: in the midst of your trial, on a scale of 1 to 10, have you asked God to show you your lesson? Are you looking for it? Share that with the men around your table. Maybe let them in on what's going on in your life. And then start thinking about, Lord, what has happened in the midst of this that might be something you're trying to teach me? Ask that question. Number 2, are you watching for the simple? As you look back, I got to a point, guys, where every day now when I wake up, I just say, Lord, I love you so much. Good morning. I just can't wait to see what you're going to do in my life today. And every day now is a treasure hunt for me. I just watch for what God is going to do. I look for Him in every place we go and every step we take. That's the way to live your life, guys. Have fun with these questions. I pray God does a rich work right now in your discussion time. And until next time, don't forget about it. Thank you.